Well, good evening and welcome to our last Fall into OBOB 2023 event. I'm Julie, the events manager at Roundabout Books in beautiful Bend, Oregon. Since this event is being recorded, if you don't want to be on video, please turn off that function. You'll still be able to ask questions when we unmute people or in the chat, but I know that sometimes people don't want themselves or their kiddos, out there for everyone to see. This will be put up on YouTube, so just something to think about. In the chat, people have been putting what school or city they're joining us from. I'd also love to know how many times you've done OBOB. Is it your first year? We had somebody on an event last week where I think it was their 5th year. So they'd started at 3rd grade and they were now into middle school doing it, which is very cool. And I hope some of you are returning from some of our events last year too. We're so excited to keep doing these. This second year has been great. We've had 13 events total, which is a lot. I really love them, but it's been a lot. So tonight we are so excited and lucky to be joined by Rebecca Stead, who is going to talk about the list of things that will not change. So just a little bit of background about the book. At a time when everything is changing for Bee and her family, the important things will always stay the same. A soon-to-be classic by the Newbery Award-winning author of When You Reach Me. After her parents' divorce, Bee's life became different in many ways, but she can always look back at the list she keeps in her green notebook to remember the things that will stay the same. The first and most important, Mom and Dad will always love Bee and each other. When Dad tells Bee that he and his boyfriend Jesse are getting married, Bee is thrilled. Bee loves Jesse, and when he and Dad get married, she'll finally have what she's always wanted, a sister. Even though she's never met Jesse's daughter, Sonia, Bee is sure that they'll be just like sisters anywhere. As the wedding day approaches, Bee will learn that making a new family brings questions, surprises, and joy, and readers will discover why the New York Times called Rebecca Stead a writer of great feeling. So Rebecca Stead, you are joining us from over in New York, correct?
I am. I'm in New York City.
Thank you so much for, so we know it's a little bit later there, and we're just so grateful that Zoom has still made it so that we can talk with lovely authors like you, have the kids join from all over the state of Oregon. So I know that we are going to have a lot of questions tonight. So let's get right into talking about the book so we can leave plenty of time for that. I'm going to ask the question I'm sure you get every single time you do one of these, but please tell us about the inspiration for this book.
Sure. First of all, it's really great to be here. And I am really thrilled that the list of things that will not change is on the OBOB list. I just have to say that because it's an honor, and it always just feels great. And it feels great to see you or see your squares. If I can't see your faces, that's fine. And I can't wait to hear your questions. So yeah, let's talk about this book. This book is kind of personal to me. I took a lot from my own growing up experience. And I can say that about a lot of my books. And I've taken different things from my life for different stories. When I was writing When You Reach Me, I pretty much reached back to my own 6th grade year in New York. I took my classroom, a lot of memories of my life that year. My mom was a contestant on the $20,000 pyramid. I stole that experience for the book and many other things. But with that story, I also had kind of a big idea, a giant kind of twisty plot. And with the list of things that will not change, and I will say that in a lot of ways, it's a even more personal book, even though the setting is not exactly the setting, of my own childhood, and Bee's school is not my school, etc. But her emotional life really, and it really came from my memory of childhood in a lot of ways. And a lot of what she's grappling with in her internal experience just came from sort of what I know about the sort of deep emotional territory of childhood. And I wanted to really use that for this story and be incredibly honest about it. By which I mean, I wanted to sort of share, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, Bea has some low moments. There's a couple times where she lashes out at people in a way that is not great at all. But she's working on it. And I resisted for this story. And those of you who have read it, maybe you have thoughts about this, which I'd love to hear. But I really resisted the big sort of twisty plot story. And that's hard to do because when you're writing books, whether you're writing for young people or for older people, you do feel a little bit of pressure to like impress people with the big story. And a lot of the time it's incredibly fun to tell a wild, twisty story or suggest, something about a hidden world or time travel or like a relationship where everything is sort of upside down from what you thought it would be. Those kinds of reveals, I think that we writers really enjoy telling those kinds of stories. But I wanted to write this book in a way that sort of served the emotional world of this kid, this 10-year-old kid. Although, interestingly, she's telling the story from the age of 12, but she's talking about the year she was 10. And so in a way, you're getting Bea at 12 and Bea at 10. But I resisted the urge to make this a story that was sort of like, aha, got you, or, here's the big surprise, here's the twist at the end, because I felt like in a way that might undermine what I was trying to do, which is to sort of serve up a story that felt really satisfying and meaningful, but that kept Bea's emotions like right at the heart of the story and didn't look away from that. So I was a kid with big emotions. I sometimes say that Bea's emotions come like mostly in extra size large or extra large. I was a little bit like that too, and I still am in a lot of ways, but like Bea, you as you grow, you find ways of expressing yourself. And also the Bea's life in two homes is also taken from my story. So my parents separated when I was 3. I went back and forth every day, just like Bea. And so that I did lift from my life. And there was a lot about living that way that made me feel a little bit different. And so I wanted to include that in the story and tell all the parts of it. And like Bea, I had 2 and still have 2 sort of fantastic, loving parents, like parents who were good divorced parents. And like Bea's parents, mine agreed from the time they separated, which happened when I was 3. They agreed that they would always live in walking distance of each other's homes. So I took a lot of details and little pieces of my own life and wrote this story. And it took a really long time because I ended up just cutting huge numbers of words, sort of in the name of trying to really leave what felt essential. And that can be one of the most important stages of writing, I think, is sort of cutting away what you don't need. So that's a long explanation, I think, of where this book came from.
So we have actually a couple of comments in the chat already that we already have a kiddo that says I go back and forth between my parents. My parents actually divorced when I was 3.
Oh,
So, and I don't know about you, this is a little off topic for that
mhm.
sense. Maybe it does speak to B being 10, though. I don't remember a time that I didn't have 2
Same,
houses, right? I don't
same. And
remember
yeah,
them being as one and then it was different. It's always been 2 houses. So
exactly.
did you think to make B that age so that she had that awareness?
Yes, I think I did do that. I can't say I remember making that decision, but maybe it's just one of those instinctual things. As storytellers, we often start with the before, or at least you can have a flashback to a before. And yeah, I chose to do that. And then also the stuff about how I wanted to explore the material, like about how B's mom kind of leaves her dad's family, which is a big part of B's life, right? Her dad is pretty close to his family, and they spend summers together at that cottage,
Mm.
and B's sort of take on the fact that her mom is just absent from that, and how she processes that kind of thing. I found really satisfying to write about.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's another reason.
What made you decide to address an LGBTQ relationship in this, though? Because obviously we know right now there's a lot of books that are being taken off of reading lists and out of schools and out of libraries for
Yeah.
talking about this stuff that is very important to a lot of people, to a lot of families. So yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, this story has actually been taken off some shelves in some places. And that's obviously incredibly sad, because what you're removing is a representation of a whole bunch of people's lives. And, there's no way to
Yeah.
accept that. For me, the decision, I think, again, was a pretty personal one. And my dad is gay, and I didn't grow up with a Jesse,
Mm.
but because my dad came out later in life. But I think that in a way, this is sort of, for me, exploring what could have been. And I mean, the truth is, probably we don't want to have a big conversation about this, but I think that one of the reasons that people feel like they can't talk about who they are is because they don't see themselves represented a lot in the world, in books, in TV, and just in their neighborhoods and in their circles of friends. And so I think the fact that my dad waited a long time to come out actually also, in addition to being kind of my own exploration of like what if in my own life, it also was maybe a reaction to the fact that he waited.
Mm.
Does that connect for
No,
you?
absolutely. With a few of the other authors we've talked to in this series, I've mentioned, and this, I've had this experience with middle grade over the last couple of years, even into YA. I'm finding these books, yours included, that I wish I'd read when I was younger, to get that experience and to see that represented, because I think it would have changed a lot of the feelings and emotions I had once I really found, people who represented that. I wasn't raised with those representations. And so in my head, it was like, oh no, and then to read this,
Right.
I'm like,
This is
this is
weird
so
and bad.
beautiful.
Exactly. I
It's
know.
normal and beautiful. So
And I
do
will
you
say
think
that
it was
as
the
a
book?
kid, oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Is it kind of the book you wish you'd had?
Yeah, I honestly wish I had had a book about emotional life like this. And I feel lucky. I mean, I was a kid who had, children's books of the 70s while I was growing up. I'm 55. And in a way, I lucked out because in the 70s, people were writing books, people like Paula Danziger or Norma Klein and Judy Blume, about kids with real emotions, not like airbrushed stories for young people where everyone just wakes up every day like with nothing on their minds. And I mean, I don't mean to condemn a whole bunch of children's books. I probably should have thought that through, but I do feel like, although there are great stories for children written before the 1970s, for sure, there started in the 70s a different kind of chapter in children's literature where there was more emotional honesty, more of a willingness to represent the world as it really is, which, by the way, is how kids experience the world because they're in it with us. And so they're getting the real deal in their lives. And so I think it's kind of a mean trick to have books that don't reflect that. And so I do feel like it would have been great for me to have a book like this that really delves into emotional experience, but I'm glad that I had the books that I had. And in fact, that's a big part of sort of how I came to know myself, I think, was by reading about the internal lives of fictional characters, because the kinds of things that characters talk about in books, people in my life were not really talking about those kinds of things. It's not like I would go to school and we would talk about, I mean, maybe with one friend, but most of the time I didn't really talk about what I was really feeling in an honest way. And so books were very important to me because it was a way for me to have kind of a conversation, not with a real person, but with myself, I guess, about all that stuff in our heads.
Well, and that's a great example of why we can't ban books, is that someone is going to read this and have a reaction, a breakthrough, a change of heart or spirit. I go back to the first time I ever read The Giver, and I just love that book.
Yeah.
I do want to open it up to questions since we have so many people here tonight. And it sounds like there's been a little bit of conversation in the chat. I think it's so funny how well you guys know how to use Zoom because you did it for school, that I'm just like, what's going on in this chat? So I think somebody asked this of another person, but I'm going to ask you. It's always a hard question for every author, but it always gets asked, is who is your favorite character in this book? I know it's like asking which is your favorite children or pet, or I mean, I get it. It's hard.
Yeah, very tough. Favorite character. I mean, I really like Angus. I really like Sheila. And, I'm partial to Bee. Jessie is fantastic. I mean, Bee's parents are great. Maybe I'm taking them for granted. I don't know. Who's your favorite?
Someone did answer Bee and Jessie. Multiple other people said it's Bee. So, I mean, if everybody loves, somebody did say Sheila. Sheila is my favorite character.
Good.
I think it's always great when you can love all of the characters, though. It's so nice to have an ensemble in a book that makes that they all complement each other that way. So let's go ahead and open it up to some questions. If you're more comfortable putting it in the chat, please do. If you're going to ask a question out loud, just make sure that let's do one at a time, and then just make sure you're getting that question out as easily as you can. So if you want to use the raise hand function in here, or just put it in the chat window and I will read it. So it looks like Nikki has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Did you really run your eczema under hot water?
Yes, absolutely. So that's another personal connection to the book. I had eczema when I was a kid. I still do. And yes, that is one of those things that I was always supposed to resist, is running my hands under hot water, which if you have scaly, itchy hands, feels amazing for 5 seconds, and then it makes it much worse.
Yeah.
So that was, sometimes I use a memory like that, and I put it into the story because when I'm writing my sort of, when I'm creating the material of the book, right? So I'm not revising and I'm not thinking critically yet. I'm just generating material that feels authentic for the story. I put in, I don't censor myself. I just, if it shows up in my head and it feels like it belongs in the story, I just put it in. I can always take it out later. But then sometimes I will find that the sort of magic of writing has meant that I've put in some details that I can actually use to mean something in the story. So to me, the fact that B is struggling to not put her hands under the hot water is connected to some of her other struggles, which is sort of thinking longer term and being sort of more self-possessed in her responses, so that she doesn't hurt other people, or with her hands hurt herself. But do you see what I mean? How in a way it's kind of connected to her emotional struggle. But I guarantee you that when I wrote that detail into the story, I was just free writing with, pen on paper, because that's how I write my first draft. And I hadn't worked all that out. That is, those kinds of things get worked out in revision, but often I find that I have put in things that I can use in ways that are really satisfying.
Yeah. Let's see here. We've got another question. Henry asked, did you have any problems during writing this book? And I'm guessing maybe like writer's block or just difficult sections.
Yeah, I had a lot of problems. Writing books is really hard. And even though I find it incredibly satisfying, I also always have days where I think, oh, this book is not working at all, or I'm lost in this part, or I don't know what this section is about. And it's really a matter of returning to it again and again. And sometimes what's helpful is to actually put it away for a few weeks and do some reading of my own. Just fall into some books, whether they're books for kids or books for adults. Do some reading and kind of, breathe in the life of other people's stories for a while in an intense way. And usually that will bring me back kind of renewed to my own story. But I get stuck in every story I write. And there's also specific challenges for every story. And I feel like one challenge for this book was figuring out the role of Mission, Jesse and Sheila's brother. That was something that I actually wrote one version of the story and then rewrote it. And that's because I was really struggling with a conversation I had with a friend. And we were talking about sort of how much negativity, young readers want to confront or think about in a book, and whether it's more satisfying for young people to watch a character in a book, whether it's an adult, in this case, it's an adult because it's Jesse, but sometimes it's a kid, encounter something really harsh, cold, unfriendly, just sort of a challenge, a person in life who is a serious challenge. And I ended up sort of deciding that I did want B to see Jesse struggle and lose something, which is the possibility at this point anyway of having what he hoped to have, I think, which was a relationship with his brother. But then taking his happiness anyway, and saying that's not going to work out. And I am sad about it, but that's not my problem. Like, his inability to be here for me is actually not my problem. And I can be happy. And so that's the way I went. So that's the challenge that I remember most clearly about this book.
Yeah. So I want to get to a couple of the people who have their hands raised, and then we'll get to more of the questions in the chat. Shiloh, let's go with you since you haven't asked one yet. Go ahead.
Do you still run your asthma under hot water?
I really try not to. The truth is, sometimes, every once in a while, but
Like a vacation from your asthma? Like a vacation?
Like a vacation, yeah, a 5-second vacation, because then it's back in 5 seconds. It's very temporary relief. So really try not to do that.
All right. 1 second, okay. Let's do one of the questions that's in the chat and then we'll come back. How long did it take you to write this book?
That's a good question. Probably 2.5 years. I take a while to write a book. I tend to be a 2 to 3 year person. I revise over and over.
Yeah, that's awesome. How old were you when you wrote it?
Oh gosh. What year did this book come out? 2020, a year we all remember. So I probably finished it in 2019. So I was probably wrote it when I was like 49 and 50.
Okay. Oh wow, that's kind of fun to go back to you as little.
Yeah, although I have a pretty good line to my childhood, not to my teen years, but I have strong memories of childhood.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is a lucky thing.
Let's see here. We did have a question about whether or not you have any siblings.
Good question. So I have a half brother who was born when I was 15.
Yeah.
And I also had for a bunch of years 2 stepbrothers, but I don't have any full siblings. And like B, I've had a lifelong yearning for a sister.
Yeah.
That's another personal connection. You can tell I use a lot of my own wishes and thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we have another question from Nikki. So go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Where did you get the idea to make Mission stand up at the wedding?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the truth is a lot of ideas that I have when I'm writing happen in the flow of writing that first draft. And I knew that my story was going to end, or that the wedding would be at the end of the story, because it's the beginning of the story. She finds out they're getting married and the end is the wedding. And that's sort of the clock of the story, as sometimes people say that. What's the clock of the story? It's sort of the time frame. But so I knew that that pressure point and that moment of conflict and recovery, because they do recover, right, as a group kind of, would probably be at the end. So I think I just instinctively put it into the wedding. And also it works well. I've noticed something about my own books, which is that I often have some kind of moment where a community comes together and makes a decision or supports someone. So either it's a group of people, or in this case, it's everybody at the wedding, right? And in another book I wrote, it was a classroom full of kids who act in solidarity to support somebody. So I think that's something that is probably just one of my things that I find really moving when someone is struggling or having a hard moment, and there's a community around them that supports them at that moment.
Yeah. Let's see here. We get this question a lot, and we have it again, is how did you find the names for your characters? Are they anyone you know had the same name, or just names you like?
It depends is the answer. Again, when I'm writing my first draft, I try not to censor myself. So I just, whatever comes, I put it on the page. But then sometimes later I have to make some changes. Like sometimes I've named 4 different characters, something beginning with the letter J, or in one of my books, I had 2 names that started with the letter V, and they were sort of similar characters in a way. And so I decided to change one because I thought it would be a little confusing. But most of the time I just go with whatever comes. So Angus, I actually had a kid named Angus in my class when I was in elementary school. He wasn't my best friend, but we were friendly, and we were in a play together, and he lived on the corner of my block. And I just have always liked his name and never used it. So I put that in there. I was actually just noticing that the names of the little brothers of Sonia. So Sonia has 2 little brothers in California. And their names or middle names, maybe it's either names or middle names, I should know, but I don't, are the names of a friend's 2 sons. So in the moment, I just don't overthink it. And then I do then in revision think, okay, do these names kind of add up in a way that feels good, Yeah.
So we had talked at the beginning kind of about your inspiration for the book. We have another question that's kind of the same, but I want to maybe pose it a little bit differently. So we have someone asking why this subject, but you were talking about you wanted something that could show a character's emotional growth, and divorce is a big, time for that. So I guess I answered my own question. Sorry. I answered this person's question for you.
Good answer.
But did you think, there's a lot of other ways you could have shown B having this emotional growth. It was, you drew so well from your own life that, did you ever think of using another big event?
To me, it's not so much the divorce is definitely in the mix, but I think a lot of what she's going through here is confronting a kind of yearning that she has, which is, yes, it's a longing for a sister, right? But it's also a kind of grappling with the fact that her life just looks different from a lot of people's. And she doesn't have a simple idea of home, right? She has a deeper, in some ways, experience, in that she is truly home in two different families, and completely home in both, but there are two of them. And she has this sister who's going to come, and in a way, I think Bee's longing for a sister, and Sonia's life in California is a lot more traditional, right? Her mom got remarried and had other kids. And so she has been living full time in this very traditional looking family with a mom, a dad, and two little brothers. And I think that, so yes, it's about the divorce, but it's also, I think, about grappling with accepting her life and the great things about it, and also accepting the hard things about it, you know? And so for me, I think it's more about Sonia and how she thinks Sonia is going to kind of solve her problem because now she'll have a sister and she won't be kind of alone in this more complicated family setup. So yeah, and then she only has this one other friend at school, well, not even a friend, but this one other person at school whose parents are divorced, and she doesn't really like that person. She's not particularly nice to that person. And so what we're really seeing is, I think, her just trying to get her arms around kind of the whole deal, you know?
And I can't remember this from the story, but how old is Sonia?
Sonia is the same age.
Okay. She's also 10.
Exactly. Like, it's so perfect because, yeah, they're the same age, same grade, and
yeah. It's interesting that, you know, she has this notebook that's going to remind her of all the things that are not going to change so that she can have faith in them and trust in them. But she wants Sonia to make the biggest change of all and move across the country. I mean, in that sense, B is being very selfish.
Yeah. I mean, she sees it, and Miriam, her therapist, tries to kind of lead her to that, you know, saying, well, let's think of all the ways that Sonia might be feeling right now, because she hasn't had a life of going back and forth the way you have. She hasn't been close to her dad before. She's traveling by herself across the whole country, and suddenly she's part of this family that pre-exists her, really, because they've all been together. And, you know, B already loves Jesse, and they've worked all that out. And B, yeah, struggles to see it. I mean, she's kind of mad when Sonia, and frustrated. I mean, she's, I think, trying, but it's maddening for her when she has to kind of wait while Sonia sorts through this.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend in elementary school who her parents were divorced and her dad lived in Boston, and she would fly out there as an unaccompanied minor. And I was just like, I don't understand what's happening. How are you getting on a plane by yourself? Like, for me at that age, we were 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, just the best of friends. It was so, because my parents had never lived outside of the same town. In fact, at one point, my parents lived in the same neighborhood where I could walk to each house, exactly like what your parents did, where, yeah, they were absolutely within walking distance of each other.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to do it. Yeah,
it was good and bad, but yes,
it's a lot more complicated for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, another connection I have is when B is served that hot dog on that plane. And there's a story about, she's telling Miriam a story about how she ate this hot dog on a plane, even though she hates hot dogs, and then she threw up. That's something that happened to me when I was flying to meet my dad in Florida.
That's rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple questions in the chat and then one hand raised, so let's get to them because we've only got about 15 minutes. Okay. So Nikki, that might be the question you were already going to ask, so I'll just read it out loud. But what is your favorite part of the story?
My favorite part?
What's your favorite part of the story?
Yikes, that's really hard. Favorite part?
It's again trying to ask somebody like the favorite character. You just sometimes can't.
Yeah, you know,
Everything,
it's really
yeah.
hard because it's like you like different parts for what they do in that part of the book. I really like the moments where Bee is home with her mom. I like those scenes a lot. I also really like the ending when her parents are together and they're looking at the moon.
Mm. That
Really made me happy. I also love the classroom scenes. I ended up, I think I spent a long time revising this book, so I ended up with a lot of extra affection for a lot of parts, but I love the scene where they're making butter. Who knows why?
Yeah. That's
but
funny.
It's hard. It's really hard to come up with that. I'd like to hear other people's, like, if there was a scene that felt
yeah, in the chat.
Extra real, or it felt like a connection or something.
Yeah, let's do that. Someone asked, did you actually hit your foot? Was that another one?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's crazy now that I'm thinking about it. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here that was true. Not everything, but yeah, I did kick a piece of glass wearing a sandal.
Oh no.
Yeah, right on Broadway.
Yeah.
My dad, we walked into a supermarket and he found Band-Aids and put them on there.
Yeah.
Went on in the store before he paid. And I thought we were going to get in big trouble that he'd opened it. Like, he opened the box and put it on my foot, on my toe before we got to the register. And I remember being really afraid that we were going to get in trouble.
Well, that's funny. All right, Nikki, let's do yours since you have your hand raised, and then we're going to do a couple in the chat. Go ahead.
So first, my favorite part of the story is when the bat comes in. And also, did the bat really come in, and did you have to get rabies shots?
Yes and no. So I had the undramatic version of that, which is that we did have a bat come into our apartment twice, actually. But it flew out. So we opened all the windows. I was asleep the first time. And our cat absolutely went crazy and was knocking lamps and books off the shelves and stuff, trying to get it. But then it just flew out. And so I didn't have to get rabies shots. And honestly, I don't think back then they would have done rabies shots in the 70s. I think they would have said, like, you're fine. It's okay. But now I think you would. And I have also read that. I don't want you guys to worry about this because it's not going to happen, but that if you're asleep in a house where a bat has been in, then sometimes you do have to get shots just in case, because you don't know. Yeah. But rabies shots are not that big a deal anymore.
Also, do you still have Red?
No. So Red is not real. I had two cats when I was a kid named Cotton and Arthur, but they have passed away. But yeah, those were my childhood cats, Cotton and Arthur.
Nice.
And I had a dog at my dad's, like Bee.
All right, we're going to do a couple that are in the chat. So we have a question of how many books have you written? And I know sometimes that can be written versus published.
Yeah, no, for me, it's the same. So I have a couple of false starts, but books that I've actually written the whole thing, they're published. And I think 7.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Mm-hmm. So that means if you liked this one, you should go check out a lot of her others. Henry and Dara asked a wonderful question, and I really love this. They said, we joined late, so maybe this was already discussed. It wasn't, so thank you. We are curious about the idea of scheduled worry time. How did you come up with that idea?
I read about it. I read about it in an article about Actually, it was an article about test anxiety and about kids who feel anxious about tests really suffer during the tests and waste a lot of time sort of spinning their wheels during the test. And it was a little article in the newspaper about the fact that they asked these kids who had tests coming up and who tended to worry about the tests to take some time before the test and to sit down and try to kind of get the worrying out of the way, and then to take the test and see if it felt any different. And they said that it really did. And I think they did better. I don't want to make anything up, but the idea was this can work. And that if you let yourself have the feeling, don't push it away, but just sit and let yourself have it, that it is like a way of freeing yourself up for a while. So that's where that.
It's kind of like making lists so that when you write it down, it's there, but it's not in here, or almost a little bit like meditation. Yeah.
And letting yourself have the feeling instead of trying to push the feeling away. If you push it away and push it away, it often will just keep coming right back to you. But if you sit with it for a minute and say, okay, I'm having this feeling, this is what it feels like. And there's also the stuff about how she's really thinking about how feelings feel in her body. That's sort of a way that Miriam is helping her to let herself have her feelings. And it's a way of becoming more self-possessed, which is working well for her.
Yeah.
So
we have a question about the hot dog, but I think so this incident that you had, you're not allergic to hot dogs.
No.
So what
I just
do you
really
think
hate
it was?
them. I just hate the taste.
You
And
think
and there was pressure. The stewardess, it's just like in the book, the stewardess or flight attendant said to me that she brought me this hot dog and I was alone. And she told me that the pilot of the plane had asked to have that hot dog put on that plane just for me. And so I felt, even though really that's not true, I don't think she was just kind of trying to make me feel special. But what she didn't know is that I really hate hot dogs. So I felt this terrible pressure to eat it, like, because the pilot had put it on the plane just for me. So I ate it, and then I just felt awful.
Yeah, that's not good. Shiloh, you have your hand raised. You want to ask a question? There you go.
I liked the ending because it was very like emotional and moving.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's the best. That's
Thank
what I'm
you.
going for. Thank you so much.
We have a lot of comments in the chat right now on who does or doesn't like hot dogs, and I just really funny.
I understand. I wish I could enjoy them.
I also just think it's one of those funny things of when someone says they don't like something that you like, it's hard sometimes for you to be like, but I don't understand why you don't like this thing, that like maybe we don't have this in common. One of my best friends from graduate school hates Butterfingers, and I absolutely love them. And so we would joke that I'd be like, well, I'll just eat all of yours. And she's like, I would never bring them home. It was something where it was just very funny to be like, how can you not like something I like?
It feels very personal. One of my sons does not like blueberries. It's very upsetting. I feel like he's really missing out on something amazing.
Right? Absolutely.
But I have to accept it. I have to accept it.
Yes. All right. We have one more raised hand from Nikki.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Why did you want to write this book?
It's interesting. Why do people want to write books? I think a lot of the time it's about connecting with other people. That's what book writing is really all about, I think. Sort of sharing something, whether it's half imagined, half personal, or completely made up, or completely personal. I mean, people write memoirs, right? But I think that a lot of the time the instinct is about, it's sort of like a little puzzle of self-expression, a book. Like you want to express yourself in a way that involves craft and hoping that other people are going to kind of join you in the emotion of your story. And I think that that is what writing is about for me, because books have really served me, like I was saying before. So I think I really am very focused on writing books that resonate, that feel real, you know, emotionally, and also have good stories and, you know, characters who you actually like spending time with and all that. I mean, it's a great challenge, but it's also self-serving, I think, to write a book in a way, because you're sort of asking to be heard and understood in a way. I think that's a lot of what writing is about, or it certainly is for me.
Yeah. I think books are an amazing way to get something that you feel or think might help somebody else out into the world. I mean, some of the best books I've read are something that, you know, made me think about somebody else or some other, you know, place I'd never been.
Also, if you think about it, sorry, we're all kind of like alone in our heads, you know, which is something that has preoccupied me since I was a really little kid. I really, the idea that I'm really alone in here has never fully appealed to me, to be honest. And so I think books are kind of magical in that, in a way, they're really brain to brain, you know, like I'm writing a story, but then you're really building it. You know, the readers are doing a lot of the work of bringing the story to life. You know, no two people have the same experience of a story, because so much, you know, there's only so many words in this book, right? I mean, a lot of what's happening is blooming inside your head using your experience and your own material. And in a way, it's like a funny mind meld.
Everyone here to think about the next time maybe you're feeling anxious or nervous about a change. Maybe you should write down a list of things that you know to be true and who loves you and who will be there to support you. And I think we should all practice a little bit more scheduled worry time and get it out of the way for our day so that we can go on and do much more fun things than sit there and worry about things. The other thing I want to leave everyone with as we wrap up this wonderful OBOB season, and I wish you all the best of luck with your OBOBs, just remember, adults feel this kind of stuff too. Anything you think that you're just, something's not going your way and you're just feeling terrible about it, I want you to know that adults are going through that. It gets better, but sometimes things still happen.
Yep.
Yes. So this will be up on YouTube probably tomorrow. I think you will all agree with me, and if you want to, we can do clappy hands, but this was my absolute favorite book of the ones that I have read so far for OBOB. So if you agree, I think this has been one of our best books, our best events. I just want to remind everyone, if you're local to Bend, come and see us at Roundabout. Wherever you are in Oregon, though, please continue to shop at your local independent bookstore, because they need you, and we also need authors. It's a very awesome relationship to keep bringing these authors to you and keep having you buy books from our stores.
And we need you.
Thank you.
Rely upon you terrifically.
Rebecca Steed, if you ever make it out here to the West Coast, please give us a holler. We are so grateful that you took the time to talk with these kiddos, to tell us more about this absolutely fantastic book, and I cannot wait to put it in more people's hands.
Thank you. This was so wonderful, you guys. It made my whole week. Thank you.
You guys all did great. Good luck with OBOB, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night.
Yes, good luck.